Hello YouTube, Skippy here, coach of this Steel City Surge, back again with another draft analysis video for you guys. If you can't tell from the thumbnail as well as the title of this video, we have been selected to partake in WPF's Delta Division for this upcoming season. Now, going into this draft, we somehow did not get another great placement in terms of overall pick. We had the 13th pick in this draft. Not horrible. It's closer to a wheel, so you can get good synergy, but not super great considering you're not going to get usually not going to get a powerhouse threat. Our first overall pick, Darkrai, fall to us at pick 13. Darkrai is a very good mon. Some people would like to say it's not that good. It has a very good speed stat of 125 base speed with a very high special attack of 135 and some pretty solid bulk all around with 90 in both defenses, a little bit low HP at 70, and then a somewhat reasonable physical attack stat. Its ability is very niche in Bad Dreams. We're not going to be using it a whole lot. It's kind of just going to be there as like a placeholder almost, because we do get Hypnosis, but it's none of the sleep-inducing moves outside of Spore and maybe Sleep Powder. If you have Compound Eyes, would be putting mons to sleep all that consistently. So it's probably not going to be that great of an ability for us to use. But in regards to what Darkrai does offer us, is it offers us a wide variety of moves that we can choose from. It's got great coverage. Obviously, it has Stab, Knockoff, and Dark Pulse. Not to mention, it also has some very great coverage in Sludge Bomb for fairy types, Ice Beam, which is just insane in its own right. It also gets Focus Blast for some fighting coverage, and then it gets some utility moves in Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave. Some other notable moves that have been left off of here would be like Hex. It gets a couple of other stuff as well, but these are the main ones that we'll probably see used throughout the season. It's a very good special attacking mon. It's a great sweeper, cleanup setup mon with Nasty Plot, and I believe it also gets Calm Mind as well. Something else to note with this draft, it is a free Terra preview draft with a total Terra attacks limit of 25 points, so we can't go over that. Unfortunately, Darkrai is Terra banned in this league, so we can't take use of some of its very great utility moves and coverage moves quite with Terra. We also can't really get out of our dark typing, which isn't that bad, but fairies and fighting types can be a bit of a problem for us. We also, our only electric move is Thunder, so any sort of bulky waters would be kind of annoying to try to deal with if it doesn't have a secondary typing. So stuff like Dondozo or Suicune or anything like that would be kind of an issue. To go along with that though, because Darkrai is more of a special attacking mon, we kind of needed something to fill the physical attacking role, to be more of a physical wall breaker, potential physical sweeper, setup sweeper, physical cleanup mon of sorts. And we initially had another variant of this mon, actually, for our second pick. We originally had Ogerpon Wellspring as our selection, but with a pick that I'll showcase later that we snagged in a trade during the grace period with another coach who's pretty well known to us, I think it helps our team a little bit better. And overall, for what we got. So our next pick in this draft technically was Ogerpon Wellspring, but we have Ogerpon Hearthflame now after that free agent move during the grace period after the draft ended. Ogerpon Hearthflame, we have used this mon before towards the end of PDL Season 2. We had some very good usage out of it. We finally figured out how to use it towards the end of the season and into the playoffs. So having that kind of recent experience with it has me excited to use it once again. It's another faster mon with 110 base speed with a pretty high physical attack of 120 and some pretty solid bulk all around. It has 80 HP, 84 defense, and then 96 special defense with a lower special attack of 60, which is perfectly fine because the whole point of this mon is to be a physical attacking wall breaker or setup sweeper in order to try to help Darkrai, break things down for Darkrai to be coming in late in the game and clean up for the rest of the match. Ogerpon Hearthflame can be a cleanup mon in its own right, It would depend on the matchup for it, but overall, it's just a great mon that we're looking forward to using again. It does have the ability Mold Breaker, which is amazing to try to use to navigate abilities on the other side. So again, very excited to use it. It's got pretty good coverage across the board. Ivy Cudgel being a 120 base power stab move, fire type move. Fire is great offensively, so we get some great fire coverage there. It gets moves like Wood Hammer and Power Whip as well, although Power Whip does have a lower accuracy, but it doesn't have the recoil of Wood Hammer, so both of those will be situationally based. But some really powerful grass stab moves as well for some of those bulky waters that Darkrai can run into issues with, which I think works out pretty well. It gets some pivoting with U-turn, so more of a fast pivoter, but can get out of a sticky situation for a mon that's maybe a little bit slower than it, but can hit really hard. We can get some little bit of chip on that and switch into one of our bulkier mons to try to take the hit for it. It also gets moves like Play Rough, Throat Chop, Zen Headbutt, some very good coverage moves across the board, as well as it gets access to Taunt, which can be very good pretty early on in a battle if we do see any need for it. It gets some other good moves as well, like Leech Seed, Spiky Shield, some very niche moves that can be used at times, but the majority of these moves and this Pokemon will be used for like wall breaking and such to try to pair with Darkrai being a fast special attacker. This is our fast physical attacker. Going into our third overall selection, we needed a good Fairy Resist for Darkrai, and we also get a very good Fighting Resist for Darkrai in Goldango. Goldango we did pick up in JJDL last season, but we never got to use it, and we ended up trading it for Heatran, which was a very big mistake. I really want to use this mon, and getting the chance to use it now makes a lot of sense considering the first two mons that we have. Goldango provides a ton of coverage for both of those mons. It's got very solid bulk all around with 87 HP, 95 defense, 91 special defense. It's got a respectable speed stat of 84 with a very good special attack stat of 133. And its ability Good as Gold prevents pretty much the majority of stuff from happening. It's very great for hazard stack teams. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of hazard stack for this team. I would have liked it, but unfortunately we just didn't go that route as much later in the draft. But the rest of the team I think is phenomenal. It gets some very good coverage moves from Make It Rain and Shadow Ball being stab type moves. It gets Focus Blast, Dazzling Gleam for some coverage. It also gets some very good support based moves with Recover for being able to be self-reliant and self-healing. It gets Trick, so we can trick off any choice items. We can trick pretty much anything that we wanted to in situations. It's going to be more of a situational based move, but can be very useful for us, especially if we want to get an item off of an opposing mon. Like for instance, we don't want to see boots on Gouging Fire. We want it to take rocks damage. We go ahead and trick that. Now we get those heavy duty boots in case we get spikes up on our side of the field, stuff like that. Another really good move it gets is Thunder Wave. It's great for speed control to make sure our fast mons stay fast and try to prevent Scarfers from outspeeding them. It's great for speed control. I think this mon is great for the start of our defensive backbone for this team because we have some great offense, but now we need to get some bulk. And Goldango provides a lot of that good bulk that we're looking for. And going off of that defensive core as well, to try to pair with Goldango for a defensive core, we decided to pick up Rotom Wash. Rotom Wash provides a very good fire and ground resist thanks to its ability Levitate, so it doesn't have a ground weakness, it's immune to it. So that helps out Goldango a ton. It gets rid of that fire weakness that it has as well with its water typing. And it's just a very bulky mon as well. It's got 107 in both defenses. Might have a low HP stat of 50, but with moves like Pain Split, that's going to help us out in the long run if you think about it. It's also got a very respectable speed of 86 as well. I mean, with power creep going on and everything, it's not as respectable as it may have once been, but it's still pretty solid for this mon. And it also has 105 special attacks, so it's pretty good on the special side. Some other notable moves it gets Trick as well. It also gets Nasty Plot, which is very nice for it, so it can boost that 105 special attack even more. Volt Switch and Thunderbolt for stab, as well as Hydro Pump. It also gets access to Will-O-Wisp, so we can try to prevent any sort of real setup from a non-physical fire type. Um, and it fits very well for the defensive side of things with Goldango. So I'm very excited to use it. I've never gotten a chance to use Washdom before, but having the opportunity to use it now with this team, I think, is going to be very nice for very specific matchups and very specific situations. But I think it'll do a lot for us this season. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what it can do for us. And like I said before, this league is a Terra preview league with 25-point Terra tax limit. And with that being said as well, a ton of Mons can Terra in this league. So I was looking throughout the board whenever we got to round 5 because I'm thinking to myself, I would have liked to have a Terra captain by this point, but I just don't see any that really fit what I'm looking for. And what I'm kind of looking for is something that can take advantage of like a higher tier tax for Terra, like something that can abuse it a little bit, something that can show up pretty much any week that it wants to. And by the time it got back to my pick, I noticed this thing was sitting there, and I'm just like, this thing provides a lot of what I'm looking for. So we went ahead and snagged free Terra Iron Crown. It's another bulky special attacker with a much better speed stat than Goldango and Rotom Wash, but it gets Quark Drive as its ability. So essentially, with being a Paradox Mon, all of them show up with either Photosynthesis or Quark Drive, and with this Mon, it can pretty much use booster energy for any one of its useful typings, or useful base stats, I should say. It does have a great typing with Steel and Psychic, which is only shared by a couple other pretty solid Mons, with Bronzong, Metagross, Jirachi, all those very solid in their own right. But with this being a newer Mon, I haven't gotten to use it yet, and it was sitting there. It cost me 15 points to Terra it from, I think, a 10-point base total, which I think is crazy. It gets some very good stab moves. It gets access to Psychic Noise. Tachyon Cutter, which is a signature move, is essentially dual Wing Beat, special attacking wise, that can't miss. And it's 50 base power, so you're hitting 100 base power move every single time with no accuracy checks. And it's stab, which can be boosted by a Terra Steel if we decide to go with that. So, crazy move. Psychic Noise, crazy move in its own right as well. It prevents healing, which is really, really good for Draft League. So very nice stab move there. It also gets some decent coverage with Focus Blast. It also gets like Air Slash and such. It gets nice pivoting with Volt Switch. It gets access to some pretty nice setup moves with Agility and Calm Mind, and then it can utilize that with stored power. Going back to its base stats, it has a pretty high special attack of 122. It's got a very good speed stat for 98 for a Steel and Psychic type. That's pretty solid. That's almost on par with Jirachi, and faster than pretty much every other Steel Psychic type to my knowledge. It's got very good bulk with 108 special defense, 100 defense, and then 90 HP. And we probably won't use its physical attack as much at 72, but pretty notable there. But being free Terra, this thing can be any Terra type at any given point. All we have to do is just disclose it before the battle. And I'm very excited to see what kind of Terras we can use with this thing and how many times we can bring it and what it can do with all of those setup moves, coverage moves, and just overall typings that we can give it. So, very excited to use this. And with that being said, we still kind of needed something for a defensive core, just a little bit. But we also needed something to deal with hazards. If you've noticed, we don't have any hazard removal at all, which is a common trend with most of my teams, unfortunately. But going into the next round, I was looking around to see if I could find even just like a solid defogger or a pretty good rapid spinner, and a lot of the typical ones like Iron Treads was gone, Donphan was gone round 3, I think, and Corviknight obviously gone. So I got what I think is more of a mid-tier kind of defogger but can provide some other support in other areas as well. We decided to snag up Galarian Weezing. Galarian Weezing, being a poison and fairy type, is pretty solid. It does have a weakness to steel, but when we have the likes of like Ogerpon, Hearthflame, Gholdengo, Rotom Wash, Iron Crown, they pretty much take care of that steel weakness. We can switch into Iron Crown, Rotom Wash, or Gholdengo at any point in time and not feel threatened by a steel type ever. So very much not concerned about any sort of steel weakness that this thing would bring. It gets access to Levitate for any sort of ground type attack that comes its way, which is great because grounded poison types are awesome, but when they're always weak to the same move or same type being ground, it's kind of annoying. We also get access to Misty Surge, which is great for statuses. It also gets access to Neutralizing Gas, which is just great for neutralizing abilities all around. And it just has two insanely great abilities and one alright ability. It's not going to do anything for us, unfortunately, for Misty Surge at least, but in regards to its base stats, it does have a lower HP stat of 65, but pretty solid attacking stats with 90 in attack and 85 in special attack, with some pretty good defense stats, but not as great special defense stats. We could run Assault Vest on this thing if we really wanted to just go all-out attack with it, but I don't see any reason why we would do that. We may just run a lot of special bulk and a little physical bulk some weeks, just depending on the matchup. But it provides some very good physical bulk and provides resistances for Darkrai from Fairy and for fighting as well, so it gives me good coverage there. It gets some very good utility moves. Like I said, it gets Defog from before. It also gets access to Pain Split, which having a lower HP stat is great for it, so it can steal more health from some of the bulkier mons like Gouging Fire and such. So that's great to see. It also gets Will-O-Wisp, so we can try to burn any physical attacker that really threatens anyone, which is great to pair with its high physical defense stat. It also gets access to Taunt and Toxic Spikes being a great way to get hazards up and get extra chip throughout a match. And some stab moves it does get access to Sludge Bomb, as well as Strange Steam, and it also has access to, I believe, Thunderbolt and Flamethrower, so it gets some pretty solid coverage moves as well to utilize, along with its support moves. So we probably won't see it using a ton of attacking moves this season, but it should be a very good support mod for us throughout the season. I've seen it do some pretty great things, and I'm excited to actually have my hands on it for a season. Going from here, this is the point where we had made a different selection in the draft, but a trade was opened up to us during the grace period that we took full advantage of. So a coach that I had mentioned before, Dashing Sceptile, had selected Landorus Therian well before we had made any selection. And at one point during the later parts of the draft, he was like, does anyone want this? I reached out, we made a trade. I had made an original selection of Mandibuzz and sent that over to Dashing, who in turn traded that in for Galarian Zapdos and then made another move or something. But regardless, we made that trade and we picked up Landorus Therian, which I think pairs very well with Darkrai, it has a solid speed tier of 91, it has insane physical attack at 145, has a very solid special attack as well at 105, so we can run it as a mixed attacker or full-on special, full-on physical, anything like that, and has some great bulk to go along with it. It has 89 HP and then 90 physical defense and 80 special defense, but its ability is Intimidate. So we get another way of dealing with physical attackers, which is phenomenal, especially when we have a couple of some pretty good specially bulky mons, especially with the way the typings and abilities are working out. So all in all, with its ground and flying typing as well, it kind of fills out some of the other typings that we kind of needed. We needed a ground type at some point, and in the draft that I had set up prior to this, we didn't have a ground type, so snagging Landorus Therian for 14 points was a steal in my eyes. It gets some great overall moves, from Stab Earthquake to being able to set up rocks to being able to U-turn in and out whenever it needs to. It also gets access to Swords Dance for setup. It also has bulk up as well up there, so it can be a little bit more physically bulky to pair with that Intimidate ability. It also gets access to Gravity in case we need to force a Flying type or Levitate Mon down to ground, so we can use Earthquake. to its maximum power, essentially. And also gets access to some niche moves like Sludge Bomb, Grass Knot, pretty much anything you would see the incarnate version of this thing running, because they both share the same movesets and everything. But that 145 base attack stat is going to be massive for us. Darkrai does appreciate a ton of physical pressure, and this does just that. Going into our last couple of picks here, we needed a second Terra Captain. Well, need is a strong word, but I figured we could get away with it. We ended up picking up a free Terra Hariyama that was still there. This ended up costing me about 7 points for a very, very bulky physical attacker. It has 144 HP and 120 base attack, with some mediocre and not great other stats. It's got 40 special attack. We're never going to run a special attacking move on this thing. 50 base speed, so extremely slow. And then it's got 60 in both defenses, which isn't horrible considering it's just insanely thick. And it pairs greatly with its abilities too. It's got thick fat, so we get a ice resist for Lander Steering, which is great. We don't need to use Iron Crown or Rotom Wash for that, or even Goldango if we don't want to. It gets access to Guts, so we can run Flame Orb with this thing if we wanted to. We don't have to care so much about Toxic Spikes being on the ground, because we can just utilize that. And then we have Sheer Force as well, so we can run Sheer Force Life Orb sets if we ever really wanted to take advantage of that. And it gets some great physical attacking moves to pair with all of those abilities and the base stats it has as well. It gets access to very powerful moves like Close Combat and Earthquake, Headlong Rush, Facade for those Guts moments where it's burned or it's poisoned or anything like that. It also gets a priority with Bullet Punch, and it does get Upper Hand, which is also pretty solid across the board. It also has some pretty solid setup in general with Bulk Up. It also gets access to Belly Drum, which is great in its own right when you pair it with those priority moves in Bullet Punch. I believe it also gets Mach Punch and Upper Hand. It gets all of those, and it just works super well. It also gets some good utility with Knockoff too. So just to throw that out there as well. But in general, this is going to be a very solid Terra Captain. It might not show up every single week. It'll probably show up like maybe 3 or 4 times throughout this season, but I'm very excited to use it as a Terra Captain. And with our last pick, we had 3 points, and I know one of my buddies, Azurus from PDL, one of the mods there, loves this Pokemon, so we picked it up. It is Greedent. This thing can do a lot of things, honestly. It's got a great move pool being a normal type, but its stats are what make it shine the most, I think. It's great in Trick Room, so if we ever wanted to run that at some point, or if we run into a team that has Trick Room, we can take advantage of that fully with its 20 base speed, which is horribly low. It also has insane bulk with 120 HP, and it's got pretty good defenses at 95 and 75 respectively. And its attacking isn't too bad, and its physical side, it's 95 attack, but then special attack 55, not great. Its abilities help make up for the lacking base stats. Maybe accentuates the HP stat as well. It gets Cheek Pouch, Gluttony, so some very good berry-based moves, or berry-based abilities there. And some of the notable moves it gets, Stab, Body Slam, pretty great. It also gets access to Gyro Ball for the really low base speed, Knockoff for some support, Trailblaze to help set it up, Earthquake for just a very powerful ground move. It also gets access to Body Press, so we can run something with that with Curse at some point. But it also gets access to Belly Drum, and when you pair that with Cheek Pouch and Citrus Berry, things are just going to break, because this thing is just so tanky. It's never going to want to really deal with anything else. But yeah, this was the team for WPF, the squad here. We are going to be running with this squad starting with week 1. So keep an eye out for that matchup whenever it shows up. We will be doing a team builder plus the matchup itself in the same video. So keep an eye out for all of that. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and catch us later for week 1 of WPF. Peace.